welcome back to the channel. I am the Darklight Emissary, and this video is going to be a bit different from my previous content so far. This one is not going to be about any of the lore of 40k directly, but instead how you can understand what is canon versus headcanon, or when canon is by its very nature unreliable. In the end, the setting at its most shallow is about giant warriors in power armor punching each other in the face while yelling about how right they are in their punching. Whether for or against a giant dude sitting in a golden armor suit on a throne of gold himself. I think, though, if you are the type of person to be interested in the story and lore of a universe like I am, it has some level of importance at its baseline. Especially if you are like me, that wants to study and discuss it with your friends, both in person and online. This requires a certain level of grounding, even for something as outlandish and often over the top and outright satirical as Warhammer 40k often is. So, take what I say not completely seriously here, but I felt like this topic was important right now, because lately, online, in places like the 40k lore subreddit, I have increasingly seen responses to questions with answers like, "None of the canon is true, it's all written as unreliable propaganda by the Imperium," or that none of what is written down matters at all since it is all made up anyways. I want to address these statements because I find them mostly incorrect and could potentially be hurtful to further discussion on Warhammer lore over time if left without any sort of response by those of us that have been reading the lore and keeping up to date on the canon for the last nearly 20 years or longer. It's important to us, and there's a reason why we've kept with it so long. So to start, is it true that all of the written content should be seen as propaganda or unreliable records from the Imperium directly? I would mostly say, no, not exactly. This highly depends on the novel, and POV the novel is being told from. In my experience, with well over 100 total novels read over the last 20-ish years, I would say at least as far as the Black Library novels are concerned, can be considered more accurate lore in a lot of cases. The reason for this is because the author is often the narrating voice, explaining people's thoughts and feelings in a given situation. That isn't information that would be given in an Imperial record about an event, really. The more propaganda-styled stuff is more in places like the core rulebooks and codexes, since those are flavored as if it is reports compiled by the Imperium at times, things like that. But even then, not all of that information is flavored that way. It is important to know who it is that is speaking, so to speak, in the narration at the time. Is it the author directly telling us, as readers, a solid fact? Is it a character telling another character a rumor? These contexts are important for what is true versus conjecture. And if you are truly wanting to compile in your mind a true core canon to go off of, it will be good to be able to not accidentally turn a rumor between characters into official fact the author is telling us, things like that. I will give a few examples of this, mostly from the Horus Heresy series of books. Please be aware of spoilers onwards for some of these books. Most of them have been out for a long time now, but if you are newer to the lore and are just reading these and wish to not spoil any of these for yourself or read ahead in the lore, you may want to skip the rest of this video and come back later once you are caught up if that is your preference. The first book, for example, of this is in the novel The First Heretic by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. There's a sequence of this book where a demon prince of Chaos Undivided, Gethel the Ascended, is taking Argal Tal and a few other space marines of the Wordbearers Legion through visions while in the Eye of Terror, helping to convert them to the necessity of chaos and the errors of the Emperor according to the Chaos Gods. One of the visions takes the Wordbearers to the Imperial dungeons, under the palace, back in time when each of the 20 Primarchs were still being created by the Emperor. The Marines move around the frosty cold room, invisible to the Imperial scientists working on each of the capsules, each holding the potential of a future Primarch. Eventually, a few of the Marines notice the capsules of the two missing Legion's Primarchs, and they start talking about how they wish they could just purge the capsules there to spare the embarrassments they represented for the rest of them. And then one of the Marines talks about how, around the same time the missing Primarchs went missing, how the Ultramarines specifically seem to have a very large amount of recruitment numbers out of seemingly nowhere. The rest of the party do not respond immediately, and this Marine goes on to insist, "You are all thinking this as well," which then gets him a response of, "This is a rumor, and we have no proof of it," basically. I'm paraphrasing this, but that's basically the response he gets. Also in this vision, Ingethel encourages Argaltal to physically cut a connection to the room, and seemingly is what led to the scattering of the Primarchs across the cosmos to begin with. Now, a few important things to note here. At no times are there any narration by Aaron, the author, to indicate anything the Marines either did or said as canon or true. It's all unreliable narrator in this case, the narrators being the Marines discussing with each other and what Ingethel is saying, and by larger proxy, what the Chaos Gods themselves, who are often liars and deceitful by their very natures, are also saying, regardless of which god is the one speaking strongest here. The only truths here to glean are that the Primarchs were in an underground facility on Terra at some point in the past, and something caused their scattering. Nothing indicates what Argaltal did as him actually being there and causing the scattering, only that they perceived that they did that thing. If anything, the way I see it, is it was chaos testing that these Marines were willing to betray the Emperor and Imperium by doing something so cataclysmic to the Emperor's plans. Had they not gone through with it, it's possible that they would have been killed right there by the Chaos Gods as, false, as not being able to carry out their eventual plans to betray the Emperor. That is my interpretation of the events, but what is certain is that it's wholly uncertain if the Marines, the Ultramarines, did gain any recruits from the missing legions. Often this conversation between these word bearers is held up as fact from the author regarding the missing legions numbers being folded into the Ultramarines. People think that Aaron Dembski-Bowden is giving this as a fact to us, when instead it can be pointed out as a possibility at worst and a rumor at best by a Marine who also heard it as a rumor within that universe. We did not hear this information from anyone important, like the Emperor, a Primarch, or anyone else we could reasonably assume has the answer to that information without having to go anywhere else for it. Now, it is totally fine for it to be your headcanon that this is fact from a setting perspective, despite the unreliability of the source information. But it would be a mistake and incorrect to then go and tell someone else that this is an irrefutable fact given by the book about the missing legions. I hope this makes sense. I am mostly against gatekeeping anyone else's headcanon or conjecture and speculation, and gatekeeping is often done in a hostile and controlling way, like your interpretation or the highway, like get out of here, your thoughts suck. Instead of gatekeeping, I do think though that it is important to correct respectfully these sorts of declarations with what was talked about if you have that knowledge yourself and the perceptions to see the difference between characters conversing about a in-universe rumor with no out-of-universe solid facts to back up the veracity of that rumor, other than the rumor itself that you're seeing talked about there. This all being said, as I previously brought up, it's important also to not invest so much passion into a correction as to be angry at someone for mistakenly seeing something as a fact versus conjecture. It's sometimes not super clear. I want to emphasize this. There is no winning in these discussions, or at least, there shouldn't be. Good discussion should leave both parties with learning something new or reinforcing knowledge in a good way. I often see hostility and name-calling when someone is being called out for using their own headcanon to declare something as solid fact. I'm not at all advocating for the sort of attitude with correcting false claims. That also needs to not be allowed in any discussions online in our communities. We need to be good about self-policing that amongst ourselves. Now, I will give it an example of complete fact in a novel. The author goes to great lengths in this book to explain that what we are seeing and hearing in this novel is not conjecture, and is not rumor, but fact. This book is The Praetor of Dorn by John French. In this book, it primarily features Alpharius of the Alpha Legion going up against Rogal Dorn of the Imperial Fists Legion. By their very nature, the Alpha Legion is one of, if not the most duplicitous of legions. Often most information regarding them is suspect. However, I will point out a few things the author does to make sure we know that some truths learned in this book are not unreliable narration. or not canon to the overall setting. One of the biggest twists in the book is that we thought we were following, through most of the book, a regular Alpha Legion Marine on a covert mission to infiltrate the Imperial Palace and then escape out to space to fulfill some other objectives on a space station near Pluto. Through some of the narration, we are shown this Marine preparing for the mission and being interviewed, discussing it with Alpharius himself. What we learn is that this Marine ended up being Alpharius, and we know this isn't a deception through a few key things I will elaborate on that are explained through other parts of this book. Number 1, we are privy to these secret conversations between Alpharius and the Marine, and it is obvious Alpharius wanted to forget he was Alpharius through some mind memory swap of one of their psychers was capable of performing on him. Alpharius wanted the true goal of the mission secret even to himself for a while. 2, Alpharius assembles and uses a specific spear that is a key weapon of Alpharius as a Primarch that was smuggled along with him. And 3, feats. We have feats of strength. Alpharius at one point is able to take down, in a small hallway, several of the most senior and elite warriors of Rogal Dorn's Legion. These feats are explained as not possible by simply a Marine. And even if a Marine thought himself to be Alpharius through some classic Alpha Legion trickery, physically he would not have been able to overcome the amount of elite senior Astartes between him and his objective. Not even someone like Sigismund, or Abaddon, or Raldoron would have been able to make it through this unscathed like this Marine did. This was one of our main hints that this was actually a Primarch, and not a Marine faking to be either Alpharius or Omegon. And this is an observation made by other characters reviewing the footage of this Marine taking down several senior members of Dorn's Legion. And then we have Dorn himself. The book gives us a scene of a flashback during the Great Crusade, where Dorn is being supported in a compliance action by the Alpha Legion. Rogal Dorn goes to meet Alpharius in a throne room area on the world they had brought to compliance. When Rogal Dorn arrives into the throne room, there is 4 members of the Alpha Legion. There is one sitting on the throne, and then 3 others standing in the room. They are all in full battle plate armor, helmets included. Dorn is able to pick out who each of them are. He points out who the one on the throne is by name, and is able to identify who Alpharius really is in the room. He can see through their deceptions. And this is an important trait previously unknown about Dorn until this event is shown to us by the author. The author specifically picks this event out from the past to emphasize to us that Dorn is both capable of the same level of subterfuge as the Alpha Legion and knows how to identify when they do it. And so, back in the present in the book, Alpharius is making his way to a control area of a space station around Pluto on the edge of the Sol system. Rogal Dorn teleports directly into the area with his bodyguards and engages Alpharius and some of his men in a melee, thus showing us that Alpharius was being countered by Dorn, who he, despite knowing this, or because Dorn knew this, chose to continue with this plan. Part of the speculation surrounding this book is that Alpharius was truly loyal to the Emperor, and that he came to speak with Dorn because he knew that possibly Dorn alone both identify he was talking to the true Alpharius, and that he would take whatever Alpharius said or did seriously. None of this is specifically told to us by the author, is the reason why Alpharius did all this, but what is told to us is that Dorn defeats and slays Alpharius. Dorn is certain he killed the real Alpharius, and not someone acting as him at this point. Also, a regular Marine cannot stand up to a Primarch, and they fight for a little bit, and in fact, Alpharius gets a strike on Rogal Dorn. Loken got struck by Rogal Dorn so quickly that, or actually I think it might have been Nathaniel Garrow, not Loken. Nathaniel Garrow was struck so quickly by Rogal Dorn that he didn't even see the blow coming, and Space Marines already can move faster than a regular human can see them. So, just to belabor the point, it was no way not a Primarch that Rogal Dorn was facing. All of what the author put together for characters in this novel so far all points to this being true, and not from an unreliable point of view or narration. All of it builds towards relying on the author telling us that these experiences are true, and not conjecture between characters like the previous excerpt regarding the word bearers. And then the author seals this all as truth even farther by giving us perspective directly from Alpharius' twin, Omegon, who wakes up in a vessel from hibernation and feels in his soul that Alpharius is dead. This is done from a narration explaining Omegon's thoughts and feelings he is musing upon in his own mind. There is no one else in this situation to deceive or hold back information from, thus confirming to us a few things: that Omegon is the one alive, Alpharius is dead, and that this is a solid bit of canon we can anchor on. While it would be sort of hilarious if the Alpha Legion was so sneaky they even broke the fourth wall to deceive even us as readers peering into this universe, nothing indicates this being the case in this novel. And this is a good example for you to see how an author, as a reliable narrator, can use characters to ensure we are getting a true perspective and not being deceived by the characters, or whether the characters are even capable of deceiving each other in a given situation. Things build upon each other in that way. There are still some events after the Horus Heresy dealing with Alpharius supposedly being killed by Robot Goleman, but that lore has never been elaborated upon in a narrative setting yet, and we don't know if Robot Goleman has the same capability to see through Alpha Legion deception like Rogal Dorn was seemingly able to. We are told with several examples by John French that Dorn is capable of playing the same games as Alpharius to great effect when he is wanting to. He simply does not like to use the same tactics as Alpharius. He finds them dishonorable. Now, where the speculation comes in is whether Alpharius arrogantly assumed Dorn was incapable of that same subterfuge, despite being previously called out in that example from the Great Crusade, or if Alpharius was actually relying on that to try and clearly relay information to Dorn to prepare him for the coming onslaught from Horus. If anything, Dorn's failing here was being too harsh and quick to kill Alpharius instead of stop and listen to him more in this given situation. And so I hope that these specific examples give you two examples, one where the author is using and allowing characters to discuss a rumor with nothing confirming that rumor, and thus not making it a true canon fact that they are discussing, versus a author going to great lengths to reinforce what we are experiencing as observers, a true canon fact, that Alpharius is dead, and that Omegon is now running the Alpha Legion alone. It would be speculation then to assume that Robot possibly faced and killed Omegon later on during the Scouring era with that new knowledge. But until we get a novel expanding upon that, we may never know that for certain as of now, but we can speculate that it's possible, and that the Alpha Legion, by 40k era, is possibly rudderless, with no masters at their helm anymore, doomed to incessant infighting and plots and deceptions that go nowhere with no grand design anymore. But nothing reliable or rumor has said as much about them at this point, but that is where you can build your own headcanon right now, but should explain it as such when sharing it with others, not declare it as fact that Robot did indeed kill Omegon. We don't know that yet. We do know that whoever it was certainly not Alpharius. At the end of the day, all this is nothing for us to get too frustrated with if people believe incorrectly or insist upon a falsehood in the lore. It's a fun universe to get into and learn the lore of, and I do believe that there is correct fact and interpretation of some events, while others are pure speculation that we'll never have solid information on. And that can be where some of the best joy comes from when exploring this universe. The untold mysteries, what could be out there. That deepens the setting and keeps it from being too shallow. Such events like the Rangdan Xenocide Wars that we know precious little about, or what lies in the dark cells underneath the Imperial Palace, the secrets of the Emperor. I would simply ask that as a fellow fan of this universe, we do what we can to maintain what is true versus conjecture in a calm and dispassionate way. There is no reason to be ever angry or disrespectful when discussing this universe with someone else. Toxicity has no place. At the same time, respectful correction is sometimes necessary, and while I would never claim that doing this is somehow some sacred duty or super important for such a frankly ridiculous universe, I would say, for all its silliness, 40k still has some incontrovertible truths and foundations to its universe. I recently had someone say to me that simply because it isn't shown to exist doesn't mean it doesn't exist in the setting. In this specific case, it was regarding the possibility of female custodes. I personally have no issue with the possibility of there ever being a female custode, but I did point out that there has never been any indication of one existing in any canon ever put to paper, either a novel or rulebook or anywhere else. That doesn't mean someone can't have that be their headcanon, that they may exist in the universe, but declaring they do exist is not true. Just because there is absence of evidence doesn't mean that everything is canon. If that were the case, I could claim to you that Twilight Sparkle is the sixth super secret chaos god that's hidden from us, or that the Emperor is actually a dog faking to be a man. There has to be some level of logic for any universe to have guidelines to work within, even if much of the premise of that universe is ridiculous and even satire by design. I don't want to ramble on and on in this video on these points. I think I have said quite enough. I hope this made sense to you and helps you understand the differences. It is always best to go to a source and read it for yourself if you have the capability. Often what I find happens is people read someone else's interpretation of a conversation on the 40k lore subreddit or some other community group, and then takes that interpretation as solid fact, and then a false layer is added to the canon by the community itself. Not everything can be interpreted, but plenty of it can be. The trick is to determine where these meet and which is appropriate at the time. I hope you can help maintain the integrity of the lore, along with me and other lore enthusiasts. The lore belongs to and is maintained by all of us as fans to some degree. Without us being invested in it, the wonderful authors and lore keepers at Games Workshop and Black Library wouldn't have the drive or jobs to produce it for us to endlessly discuss, sometimes decades after something is released. It's part of what makes it great. I will leave this topic here. Thanks once again for the support you are showing my channel. It means so much to see the response so far. We are nearly halfway through to 400 subscribers in only a couple months. For those of you who have subbed, thank you so much. For those of you who have not, thank you for your view and time regardless. And I hope you consider liking and subscribing to see more of my content in the future. Please leave a comment with your thoughts on this topic or a request for a future video. Bring your light into the dark places, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you and have a great day or night wherever you are. And also to conclude here, in the description for this video will be a link to my Discord channel if any of you want to discuss any of my topics from my videos or any other lore point. We are growing a little community in that Discord server. It will be in the description, and that link will be open for about a week from the time of this video being launched. So thank you again. Have a great day or night, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you.